Map of the New World. Archipelagos. At the end of this sentence, rain will begin. At the rain's edge, a sail. Slowly the sail will lose sight of islands. Into a mist will go the belief in harbors of an entire race. The 10 years' war is finished. Helen's hair, a gray cloud. Troy, a white ash pit by the drizzling sea. The drizzle tightens like the strings of a harp. A man with clouded eyes picks up the rain and plucks the first line of the Odyssey. Beachhead, for Anthony Hecht. I come up to a break on the beach where a channel of the river is pushed back by the ancestral quarrel of fresh water with salt. Under it, scalloped sand. Not caring who's at fault, I turn and cross inland. A sepia lagoon bobbing with coconuts. Helmets from the platoon of some marine unit whose channel links those years of boyhood photographs in life or colliers to dim Pacific surf. Sandpipers burst like white notes from a ceremonial band, circle, then on wet sand discuss their cancelled flight. The beach is hot, the fronds of yellow dwarf palms rust. The clouds are close as friends. The sea has not learned rest, exploding, but not in, thank heaven, that rhetoric all wars must be fought in. I break a brittle stick pointlessly and walk on, holding the stick until it hefts like a weapon. There is nothing to kill. Guadalcanal and Guam, they must now look like this abandoned Navy base camouflaged in gold palm. Divisions, dates, and armor-marked hair are not enough. The surf, a plasterer, smooths a fresh cenotaph. I hurl the stick and brush right hand against left hand. Snipers prowl through the brush of my hair. I stand, not breathing till they pass, and the new world feels sure. Sand and sand-whitened grass, then a jet's signature. This poem is in 6 or 7 sections from the volume Midsummer, and it's called Tropic Zone. It's set in Puerto Rico, and it probably deals with the way that the empire looks at its colonies or provinces. Tropic Zone. A white dory face down, its rusted keel staining the hull, bleeds under the dawn leaves of an almond. Vines grip the seawall and drop like olive green infantry over from Cuba. This is my ocean, but it is speaking another language since its accent changes around different islands. The wind is up early, campaigning with the leaflets of seagulls. But from the balcony of the guest house, I resist the return of this brightening noun, whose lines must be translated into El Mar or La Mar, and death itself to La Muerte. A rusty sparrow alights on a rustier rain gauge in the front garden, but every squeak addresses me in testy Spanish. Change to a light shirt, a walk on our beach should teach you our S's as the surf says them. You'll recognize hovels, rotting fish nets. Also, why a white dory was shot for being a gringo. I go back upstairs, for so much here is the empire envied and hated, that whether one chooses to say Venthes or Vences involves the class struggle as well. So be discreet. Changed to a light shirt, I walk out to Cervantes Street, shadow barred, a water sprinkler or a tank approaches. The corners are empty, the boulevards open like novels waiting to be written, clouds like the beginnings of stories. The sun is wholly up now. Things are white or green. Clouds, hills, walls, leaves on the walls and their shadows. Dew turns into dust on the quiet municipal cedars. The sprinkler rolls past as the wrong done to our fathers weeps along empty streets, down serene avenidas named after stone poets, but the sprinkling only grows traffic. When noon strikes, the present arms pose of sentries in boxes before the palace of governors. History will pierce your memory like a migraine. But, however their flame trees catch, the green winds smell lime-scented, the indigo hills lie anchored in seas of cane as deep as my islands. I know I would feel disoriented in Oriente, my tongue dried to a coral stone. Along white-walled, palm-splashed Condado, the breeze smells of a dialect so strong it is not disinfected by the exhaust of limousines idling outside the hotels. While far out, unheard, the grinding reef of the Moro spits out like corals the indigestible sorrow of the Indian, bits for the National Museum. Blue skies convert all genocide into fiction. But a man drawn to the seawall crouches like a question or a prayer. And my own prayer is to write lines as mindless as the oceans of linear time, since time is the first province of Caesar's jurisdiction. Above hot tin billboards, above Osteria del Mar, wherever the empire has raised the standard of living by blinding high rises, gestures are made to the culture of a remorseful past, whose artist must stay unforgiving even when commissioned. If the white architecture code is Rio's, so in a terracotta lobby with palms, a local jingle gurgles of a new cerveza, frost-crusted and golden, right next to a mural that has nationalized Eden in vehement acrylics. And this universal theme sees the golden bear, the gold mines, the gold of their bodies as one, and our two tropics. A necklace of emerald islands is fringed with lace, starched as the ruffles of Isabella's bodice. Now the white-breasted Nina and Pinta and Santa Maria bring the phalli of lances, penetrating a jungle whose vines spread apart to a parrot's primal scream. Then, shy as the ferns, their hands are bending, stare fig-nippled maidens with faces calm as stones. And as is the case with so many revolutions, the visitor doubts the murals and trusts the bear. Noon empties balconies, but the arched eyebrows of the plaza are not amazed at the continuum. A fly drilling holes in a snoring peon's face. The arched shade of patios humming with audible heat, and long-fingered shadows retracting into a fist. The statue's sword arm is tired. He'd like to dismount from his leaf-green stallion and curl up in the shade with the rest of his country. And that's how it was in the old scenarios, a backdrop for the hectic conscience of the gringo with his wasp's rage at tedium. but now in the banana republics, whose bunches of recruits look green in fatigues, techniques of camouflage have taught the skill of slitting stomachs like fruits, and a red star without a sickle is stitched to a flag. Now the women who are folded over wrought iron balconies like bedsteads, their black manes hanging down, are not whores with roses, but dolls broken in half. On a wall, a bleeding viva, hieroglyphs speeches that lasted 4 hours in marathon dialectic. Sand-colored mongrels prowl round a young Antigone, her face flat as an axe of pre-Columbian stone. At the movies, I still love it when gap-toothed bandidos laugh in growling pidgin, then grin at the sudden contradiction of roses stitching their guts. In colonial fiction, evil remains comic and only achieves importance when the gringo crosses the plaza, flayed by the shadows of fronds. Whenever a thought can go back 70 years, there is hope for tradition in these tropical zones. The old men mutter in white suits, elbows twitching like pigeons on their canes, under the dusty leaves of the almonds that grant them asylum from paths ruined by bicycles, from machines with umbrellas dispensing francs and cones. Their revolution is that things come in circles. The socialists do not appreciate that, but old almonds do, and there is appreciation in the tilt of a cannon's chin to the horizon, and applause from the seawall when a crash of lace is like that moment of flamenco, ah, mi corazón, that moment of flamenco when the dancer's heels rattled like gunfire, and above her tilted comb her clapping hands were like midnight on a clock. For each old man in his white Panama hat, there is no ideology in the light. This one shakes his cane like a question without answers. That one riddles the militia with his smiles. Another one leans backwards in a coma of silence. When lilies opened like Victrola horns, when dusk spread feathers like a fighting cock, and down the Sunday promenade for miles, the civil guard kept playing La Paloma, and gulls like doves waltzed to the gusting lace, and everyone wore white, and there was grace. You've forgotten the heat. It could burn from a zinc fence. Not even the palms on the seafront quietly stir. The empire snares at all thoughts in the future tense. Only the shallows of this inland ocean mutter lines from another sea, which this one resembles. Myths of analogous islands of olive and myrtle, the dream of the drowsing Gulf. Although her temples, white blocks against green, are hotels, and her stores shopping malls, in time they will make good ruins. So what if the hand of the empire is as slow as a turtle signing the surf when it comes to treaties? Genius will come to contradict history, and that's there in their brown bodies, in the olives of eyes, as when the pimps of demotic Athens threaded the chaos of Asia, and girls from the stick villages, henna whores with a hetero. The afternoon tide ebbs, and the stench of further empires, rising from berries that fringe the hems of tyrants and beaches, reaches a bench where clouds descend their steps like senates passing, no different from when, under leaves of rattling myrtle, they shared one shade, the poet and the assassin. Imagine where sand is now, the crawling lava of military concrete. Sprinkle every avenue with the gray tears of the people's will. Tyranny brings over its colonies this disorientation of weather. A new ogre erects his bronzes over the parks, though the Senate of swallows still arranges itself on benches for the usual agenda, and three men can still argue under a changed street sign, but the streets are emptier and the mouth dry. Imagine the fading hysteria of peeling advertisements, and note how all the graffiti agree with the government. You might say, yes, but here are mountains, park benches, working fountains, a brass band on Sundays. Here the baker still gives a special twist to the end of his father's craft. Until one morning you notice that the three men talk softly, that mothers call from identical windows for their children to come home, that the smallest pamphlet is stamped with a single star. The days feel longer, people resemble their cars that are gray as their uniforms. In the millennium, most men at night sleep with their eyes to the wall. If you were here in this white room, in this hotel, whose hinges stay hot even in the wind off the sea, you would sprawl knocked out by la hora de siesta. You couldn't rise for the resurrection bell or the sea's gong ringing with silver. You'd stay down. If you were touched, you'd only change that gesture to a runner's in that somnambulist marathon, and I'd let you sleep. Things topple gradually when the alarm clock with its conductor's baton begins at 1. The cattle fold their knees in the quiet pastures. Only a mare's tail switches, feather dusting flies. Drunk melons roll into ditches, and gnats keep spiraling to their paradise. Now the first gardener under the tree of knowledge forgets that he's Adam. In the ribbed air, each patch of shade dilates like an oasis to the tired butterfly, a green lagoon for anchor. Down the white beach, calm as a forehead that has felt the wind, a sacramental stasis would bring you sleep, which is midsummer's crown. Sleep that divides its lovers without rancor, sweat without sin, the furnace without fire, calm without self, the dying with no fear, as afternoon removes those window bars that striped your sleep like a kitten's or a prisoner's. Early Pompeian. This poem is about a miscarriage. The epigraph is from Shelley. Ere Babylon was dust, the Magus Zoroaster, my dead child, met his own image walking in the garden. That apparition, soul of men, he saw. In the first years, when your hair was parted severely in the Pompeian style, you resembled those mosaics whose round eyes keep their immortal pinpoints, or were, in laughing days, black olives on a saucer. Then one night, years later, a flaring torch passed slowly down that wall and lit them, and it was your turn. Your girlhood was finished. Your sorrows were robing you with the readiness of woman. The darkness placed a black shawl around your shoulders, pointed to a colonnade of torches like palm trees with their fronds on fire, pointed out the cold flagstones to the sacrificial basin where the priest stands with his birth sword. You nodded, you began to walk. Voices stretched out their hands, and you stepped from the wall. Past the lowering eyes of rumors, past the unblinking stares of the envious, as step by step it faded behind you, that portrait with its plum-parted lips, the skin of pomegranate, the forehead's blank, unborn bewilderment. Now you walked in those heel-hollowed steps in which all of our mothers before us went. And they led you, pale as the day-delivered moon, through the fallen white columns of a hospital to the volcanic bedrock of mud and screams and fire, into the lava of the damned birth blood, the sacrificial gutters, to where the eye of the stillborn star showed at the end of your road, a dying star fighting the viruses of furious constellations, through the tangled veins, the vineyard of woman's labor, to a black ditch under the corpuscles of stars, where the shrunken grape would be born that would not call you mother. In your noble, flickering gaze, there was that which repeated to the stone you carried, the hardest times are the noblest, my dead child. And the torch passed its flame to your tongue, your face bronzed in the drenches and fires of your finest sweat. In their black sockets, the pebbles of your eyes rattled like dice in the tin cup of the blind fates. On the black wings of your screams, I watched vultures rise, the laser lances of pain splinter on the gods' breastplates. Your nerve ends screamed like fifes, your temples repeated a drum, and your firelit head in profile passed other faces as a funeral ship passes the torch-lit headlands with its princely freight, your black hair billowing like disheveled smoke, your eyelids whitened like knuckles gripping the incomprehensible, vague sills of pain. The door creaked, groaning open, and in its draught, a whirlwind, the lamp that was struggling with darkness was blown out by the foul breeze of the amniotic sea. By the black harbor, the black schooners are tired of going anywhere. The sea is black and salt as the mind of a woman after labor. Child, wherever you are, I am still your father. Let your small dead star rock in my heart's black salt, this sacrificial basin where I weep. You passed from asleep to asleep with no pilot, without a light. Beautiful, black and salt, warm is the starry night. The smell of the sea is your mother, as is this wind that moves in the leaves of the wharf under the pavement light. I stare into black water by whose hulls heaven is rocked like a cradle, except for one extinguished star. And I think of a hand that stretches out from her bedside for nothing, and then is withdrawn, remembering where you are. I will let the nights pass. I shall allow the sun to rise. I shall let it pass like a torch along a wall on which there is fadingly set, stone by fading stone, the face of an astonished girl, her lips, her black hair parted in the early Pompeian style. And what can I write for her but that when we are stoned with pain, and we shake our heads wildly from side to side, saying, no more again to certain things. No more faith, no more hope, only charity. Charity gives faith and hope much stronger wings. As for you, little star, my lost daughter, you are bent in the shape forever of a curled seed sailing the earth, in the shape of one question, a comma that's before us, whether death is another birth. I had no answer to that tapping under the dome of the stomach's round coffin. I could not guess whether you were calling to be let in or to be let go, when the door's groaning blaze seared the grape-skin frailty of your eyes, crying against our light, and all that is kin to the light. You had sailed without any light your 7 months on the amniotic sea. You never saw your murderer, your birth and death giver, but I will see you everywhere. I will see you in a boneless sunbeam that strokes the texture of things, my arm, the pulseless arm of an armchair, an iron railing, the leaves of a dusty plant by a closed door, in the beams of my own eyes in a mirror. The lives that we must go on with are also yours. So I go on down the apartment steps to the hot streets of July the 22nd, 1980 in Trinidad, amazed that trees are still green around the savannah, over the Queen's Park benches, amazed that my feet can carry the stone of the earth, the heavier stone of the head. And I pass through shade where a curled blossom falls from a black forked branch to the asphalt soundlessly, no cry. You knew neither this world nor the next. And as for us, whose hearts must never harden against ourselves, who sit on a park bench like any calm man in a public garden watching the bright traffic, we can only wonder why a seed should envy our suffering, to flower, to suffer, to die. Gloria, Perdita, I christen you in the shade on the bench with no hope of the resurrection. Pardon the pride I have taken in a woman's agony. From Midsummer. A wind-scraped headland, a sludgy dishwater sea, another storm-darkened village with fences of crucified tin. Give it up to a goat in the rain whose iron muzzle can take anything, or to those hopping buzzards trailing their torn umbrellas in a silvery drizzle that slimes everything. On the horizon, the sea's silver language shines like another era, and seasick of poverty, my mind is out there. A storm has wrecked the island, the beach is a mess. A bent man, crouching, crosses it, cuffed by the wind. From that gap of blue, with seraphic high-mindedness, the frigate birds are crying that foul weather lifts the soul, that the sodden red rag of the heart, when it has dried, will flutter like a lifeguard's flag from its rusty pole. Though I curse the recurrence of each shining omen, the sun will come out and warm up my right hand like that old crab flexing its fingers outside its hole. Frail from damp holes, the courageous, pale bestiary of the sand seethes. The goat nuzzles, head bent among flashing tins, and the light's flood tide stutters up to a sandbar in the estuary, where, making the most of its Egyptian moment, the heron halts its abrupt, exalted stride, then a slow freeze of sunlit pelicans. I heard them marching the leaf-wet roads of my head, the sucked vowels of a syntax trampled to mud, a division of dictions, one troop black, barefooted, the other in red coats, bright as their sovereign's blood. Their feet scuffled like rain, the bare soles with the shod. One fought for a queen, the other was chained in her service, but both in bitterness traveled the same road. Our occupation and the army of occupation are born enemies, but what mortar can size the broken stones of the barracks of Brimstone Hill to the gaping brick of Belfast? Have we changed sides to the mustached sergeants and the horsey gentry because we serve English, like a two-headed sentry guarding its borders. No, language is neutral. The green oak of English is a murmurous cathedral where some took umbrage, some peace, but every shade, all helped widen its shadow. I used to haunt the arches of the British barracks of VG. There were leaves there, bright, rotting like revers or epaulets, and the stenches of history and piss. Leaves piled like the dropped H's of soldiers from rival shires, from the brimstone trenches of Agincourt to the gas of the Somme. On Poppy Day, our schools bought red paper flowers. They were for Flanders. I saw Hotspur cursing the smoke through which a popinjay minced from the battle. Those raging commanders from Thersites to Percy, their rant is our model. I pinned the poppy to my blazer. It bled like a vowel. Something primal in our spine makes the child swing from the gnarled trapeze of a sea almond branch. I have been comparing the sea almond's shapes to the suffering in Van Gogh's orchards, and that too is primal. A bunch of sea grapes hangs over the calm sea. The shadows I shovel with a dry leaf are as warm as ash, as noon jerks towards its rigid, inert center. Sunbathers broil on their grid. The shallows they enter are so warm that out in the reef the Blair grouper lunges at nothing, teased by self-scaring minnows. Abruptly remembering its job, a breaker glazes the sand that dries fast. For hours without a heave, the sea suspires through the deep lungs of sponges. In the thatched beach bar, a clock tests its stiff elbow every minute, and outside, an even older iguana climbs hand over claw, as unloved as Quasimodo, into his belfry of shade, swaying there. When a cloud darkens, my terror caused it. Lizzie and Anna lie idling on different rafts, their shadows under them. The curled swell has the clarity of lime. In 2 more days, my daughters will go home. The frame of human happiness is time. The child's swing slackens to a metronome. Happiness sparkles on the sea like soda. I'll just read a section, 2 final poems. A section from a long poem called The Fortunate Traveler, in which the traveler of the poem, who seems to be working for some organization to help backward countries, has written this confession. He's in a remote part of the world, an island, and he is doomed because there are men after him for some raw deal he got involved in. Now I have come to where the phantoms live. I have no fear of phantoms, but of the real, the Sabbath benedictions of the islands. Treble clef of the snail on the scored leaf, the tantum ergo of black choristers soars through the organ pipes of coconuts, across the dirty beach surpliced with lace. They pass a brown lagoon behind the priest, pale and unshaven in his frayed soutane, into the concrete church at Canaries. As Albert Schweitzer moves to the harmonium of morning, and to the pluming chimneys, the groundswell lifts Lebensraum, Lebensraum. Black faces sprinkled with continual dew, dew on the speckled croton, dew on the hard leaf of the knotted plum tree, dew on the elephant's ears of the Dauphin. Through Kurtz's teeth, white skull in elephant grass, the imperial fiction sings. Sunday wrinkles downriver from the heart of darkness. The heart of darkness is not Africa. The heart of darkness is the core of fire in the white center of the Holocaust. The heart of darkness is the rubber claw selecting a scalpel in antiseptic light, the hills of children's shoes outside the chimneys, the tinkling nickel instruments on the white altar. Jacob in his last card sent me these verses. Think of a God who doesn't lose his sleep if trees burst into tears or glaciers weep. So, aping his indifference, I write now, not Anno Domini, after Dachau. The night maid brings a lamp and draws the blinds. I stay out on the veranda with the stars, breakfast congealed to supper on its plate. There is no sea as restless as my mind. The promontories snore, they snore like whales. Cetus the whale was Christ. The ember dies, the sky smokes like an ash heap. Reeds wash their hands of guilt, and the lagoon is stained. Louder, since it rained, a gauze of sandfly hisses from the marsh. Since God is dead, and these are not his stars, but man-lit, sulphurous sanctuary lamps, it's in the heart of darkness of this earth that backward tribes keep vigil of his body, in Dea, Lampion, and this bedside lamp. Keep the news from their blissful ignorance. Like lice, the hungry of this earth swarm to the tree of life. If those who starve like these rain flies who shed glazed wings in light grew from sharp shoulder blades their brittle vans and soared towards that tree, how it would seethe our justice. But fires drench them like vermin, quotas prevent them, and they remain compassionate fodder for the travel book, its paragraphs like windows from a train. For everywhere that earth shows its rib cage and the moon goggles with the eyes of children, we turn away to read. Rimbaud learned that. Rimbaud at dusk, idling his wrist in water past the temples that plumed dates still protect in Roman file, knew that we cared less for one human face than for the scrolls in Alexandria's ashes, that the bright water could not dye his hand any more than poetry. The dow's silhouette moved through the blinding coinage of the river that endlessly, until we pay one debt, shrouds every night an ordinary secret. The drawn sword comes in strides. It stretches for the length of the empty beach. The fishermen's huts shut their eyes tight. A frisson shakes the palm trees and sweats on the traveler's tree. They found out my sanctuary, Philippe, last night. It had 2 gentlemen in the village yesterday, sir, asking for you while you was in town. I tell them you was in town. They sent to tell you there is no hurry. They will be coming back. In loaves of cloud and have not charity. The weevil will make a Sahara of Kansas. The ant shall eat Russia. Their soft teeth shall make and have not charity the harvest desolation, and the brown globe crack like a begging bowl. And though you fire oceans of surplus grain and have not charity, still through thin stalks, the smoking stubble, stalks grasshopper, third horseman, the leather-helmed locust. The season of phantasmal peace. Then all the nations of birds lifted together the huge net of the shadows of this earth, in multitudinous dialects, twittering tongues, stitching and crossing it. They lifted up the shadows of long pines down trackless slopes, the shadows of glass-faced towers down evening streets, the shadow of a frail plant on a city sill, the net rising soundless as night, the birds' cries soundless, until there was no longer dusk or season, decline or weather, only this passage of phantasmal light that not the narrowest shadow dared to sever. And men could not see, looking up, what the wild geese drew, what the ospreys trailed behind them in silvery ropes that flashed in the icy sunlight. They could not hear battalions of starlings waging peaceful cries, bearing the net higher, covering this world like the vines of an orchard, or a mother drawing the trembling gauze over the trembling eyes of a child fluttering to sleep. It was the light that you will see at evening on the side of a hill in yellow October, and no one hearing knew what change had brought into the raven's cawing, the kildare's screech, the ember circling chuff, such an immense, soundless and high concern for the fields and cities where the birds belong, except it was their seasonal passing love made seasonless, or from the high privilege of their birth, something brighter than pity for the wingless ones below them, who shared dark holes in windows and in houses. And higher they lifted the net with soundless voices, above all change, betrayals of falling suns. And this season lasted one moment, like the pause between dusk and darkness, between fury and peace. But for such as our earth is now, it lasted long.